Welcome back into another episode of the Believe in Georgia Tech podcast. We're your co-hosts. That is RJ Schafer. I'm Jackson Caudell, coming to you on Tuesday, October 7th. Starting our new kind of ACC beginning of the week show. We promised y'all at the end of last week that we were going to do that. We're going to kind of, quote unquote, power rank the ACC teams, at least to our opinion. Me and him discussed these before the show. And then we're just going to kind of talk about the ACC picture and some of the teams' paths to the ACC championship. No, we're not going to talk about North Carolina's path to the ACC championship. It's not going to be like for every team, hey, here's how you do it. But it's just going to kind of be like how things are heading into the week, and just kind of our overall thoughts on the conference. Obviously, it's the conference Georgia Tech plays in. These aren't going to – we're obviously going to spend the majority of our time or some of our time talking about Georgia Tech, but this isn't a Georgia Tech just solely focused episode. We're going to have our Virginia Tech preview later this week. Obviously, we'll have our instant reaction Saturday. But before we get into today's episode, RJ, how you doing, man?
Feeling good. We're heading into an interesting week in the ACC. A non-conference game here, a couple of interesting conference matchups, and we get to talk about the ACC landscape in a full. So, I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get into today's episode, if you're watching this show, haven't subscribed to the channel, would love it if you would do so. Tell a friend, tell a family member, tell an enemy if you're so inclined. Keep growing the channel. We love the support we've gotten. Really appreciate you guys. Follow us wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a review over there. Love reading those, and just kind of learning more about what you guys like about the show, what you guys want to see change and everything. But are you ready to get into it?
Absolutely.
So as we head into week 7, like conference play is really starting to take shape. Look, you had some teams begin conference play like Georgia Tech was playing a conference game in week 3 against Clemson. You had some like last weekend Miami played their first conference game against Florida State. So there's still a little ways to go, but I do think that the picture is starting to form. And I guess we're not going to spend a ton of time talking about these teams at the bottom just for the show's sake. I think we're going to kind of focus on the teams we have at the top and kind of seeing each team's path to get to Charlotte and everything. So if you're watching this and you're a fan of one of these teams at the bottom, I do apologize, but we're not going to spend just a ton of time talking. And I guess there was, I quote, heated debate between me and RJ about the last spot in the ACC. I think there's 2 true contenders right now. And I think you either have to pick North Carolina or you have to pick Boston College. We did end up on Boston College. I know North Carolina is the more popular one to pick, and I will not argue with anyone that disagrees with me about this. If you do, please let me know in the comments and everything. But we kind of landed on them because, one, they did lose to Stanford. I know it was on the road. It was a late kick and everything. But just the way they lost to Pitt on Saturday, with Pitt starting a freshman quarterback, and that game was over as soon as it kicked off. Like I'm one of the few people probably on earth that watched that entire game, just because I try to watch all the ACC games because of Georgia Tech obviously being in the conference and trying to they played Pitt later in the year. I don't even know what to say about that performance. Like, it was one of the most disheartening performances I've seen all year. Boston College is 1-4 now, and they're almost certainly not going to a bowl game, I would say, at this point. I was kind of intrigued by them at the beginning of the year. Like, I thought Dylan looked interesting at the start of the season, especially against Michigan State. This team is bad.
Yeah, and we talked about it earlier in the season. I wouldn't say I was super high on Boston College, but I was optimistic looking at the schedule because you go in, you have an opportunity to beat Michigan State, and then you play Stanford, you play Cal, UConn later on in the schedule. And I thought, there's a reasonable path for this Boston College team to make a bowl game. Now that we're 5 games into the season, I just don't see it. I mean, there's no, I don't want to say they've given up, but it's hard to see Boston College in a competitive game at this point in the season. You saw how it was against Pitt. I mean, they lost by a bajillion in that game. And they were just never competitive. I think when you talk about tiers of the ACC, there's 2 teams at the bottom. It's North Carolina and it's Boston College, and they're far and away lower than everybody else.
Yep. I mean, debate amongst your friends. I'm sure this is a heated debate all across ACC country about who's really the worst team. But and the thing is, like Boston College win total, I think was at like 5.5 to start the year, and I'm like, okay, if they're going to get into a bowl game, they have to start quick, and they're 1-4, and they're going to be favored in maybe one game the rest of the season, and that's at home against UConn. Like, say what you want to about Clemson. I mean, they're big underdogs against Clemson. They have to go to Louisville. They host Notre Dame, host SMU, host Georgia Tech, and then have to go to Syracuse. Like, they're probably going to be dogs at Syracuse.
Yeah, and I mean that back end schedule, it's just ugly, especially as a team that's bottom tier of the ACC. Like you play Louisville, you play Notre Dame, SMU, and Georgia Tech all in a row. I mean it's just asking for a disaster. I honestly don't see a path where they get more than 3 wins this season.
Yeah. Tough scenes. Tough
Yeah.
scenes. All right, let's go to everybody's favorite ACC team to talk about. And I promise you, we are not going to talk about them as long as everybody else seems to. Like, I'm not going to get into all like a diatribe about Bill Belichick and all that stuff over there. It was a stupid hire from the start. It's clearly not working. This is the worst North Carolina team I've ever seen. I don't even think it's close.
Yeah, I mean to me it's a dumpster fire.
Yeah, like it's Clemson. All right, I hate to bring up bad memories, so Georgia Tech fans, plug your ears up right quick. So when Clemson beat Georgia Tech in Atlanta, or when they put 70 on them when they had Trevor Lawrence, that's what could have happened to North Carolina. I really do think Dabo has respect for Belichick and just called the dogs off because like it was 35-3 at halftime, and they scored 28 in the first quarter. Not only that, but like UCF is a below average team in the Big 12, and like they dominated North Carolina. And also the clearest, so Charlotte went down 23-0 to USF in the first quarter the other night. And why do I bring that up? Like Charlotte played North Carolina kind of tough. I think that's when when I was watching that USF game the other night, I was like, oh Lord, like this is bad. Like it's just a mess. The team has no talent. Again, I'm not going to get into a whole just spiel about the whole thing, but it was stupid from the beginning, and they're a terrible football team.
Yeah, I mean you talk about their best win being Charlotte, and Charlotte, I don't know if your fans, I don't know if y'all subscribe to Kelly Ford rankings, but Charlotte is pretty consistently in the bottom five of those rankings. They're not a very good team. They almost lost to an FCS school. There's not much to say positive about this North Carolina team. I could go on probably for 15 minutes talking about Bill Belichick in North Carolina and how that was a dumb hire. I agree with you completely, but again, like we said with Boston College, I see a path for North Carolina just to not win a game for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get into this team in just a second, but I mean, like the ACC game of the year on November 8th when Stanford goes to Chapel Hill. I mean, that's going to be. I mean, North Carolina the rest of the way I guess. Anyway, North Carolina's bad. I'm not even going to pull up their schedule. They stink. All right, let's go to number 15, Stanford. Now, I want to say a nice thing about Stanford at the start here because there's not much else I have to say about them. I thought after that Hawaii game they were going to go 0-12. I really did. Like I didn't think because Hawaii is a bad football team. But I will give Stanford some credit. They found a way to beat Boston College at home. They did end up beating San Jose State, and I know that doesn't sound super impressive, but for a program that lost all its best players in the spring portal after Troy Taylor got fired, and you have an interim coach, Frank Reich, who's not been a head coach in college before, and he's not going to be here past this season, to find a way to get up and get motivated to win those games, I will say I will tip my cap to them again. Like the only game I think they could win the rest of the way is the North Carolina game. Like okay, maybe they beat Cal at the end of the year, but this team just it lacks a lot of talent, especially at the quarterback position. They don't have a lot going for them. But I do want to like at least point out like they did find a way to scrap together a couple wins, and I do think they should be ended for that. As sad as that sounds, and I'm not even being like facetious. Like I truly do like. Hey, good job.
Yeah, and honestly, like looking at the stats, offense and defense, there's really not much that jumps off the paper, but I do give credit for them um, going out and winning those games. I mean, I think they were underdog against San Jose State, went out, made a comeback, won that game, and I think that's really important. Again, they're still a bottom tier ACC team, but I think they're a fair step above, what we talked about with North Carolina.
Yeah, like I picked them last in the preseason, and look, they on paper like they're right there with North Carolina and Boston College as the two as the worst teams in the ACC. But again, this team never had a chance to be any good this year, and they at least found ways to bounce back from that Hawaii game and get a couple of victories. So tip my cap to them. Number 14, we've got Virginia Tech. Obviously, that is who Georgia Tech plays this weekend. That we're going to talk an awful lot about them later this week. It's just I'll give them look. The year couldn't have started off worse. Obviously, as everybody knows, they fired Brent Pry after an 0-3 start. They did play South Carolina tougher than I think most people thought. And look, I know South Carolina has been a little bit disappointing, but like Virginia Tech did hang tight in that game after a disastrous start. They ended up getting just killed by Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's a pretty good team. The bottom fell out against Old Dominion. They were down 31-0 at one point. And Old Dominion is a good team, but that should never happen to Virginia Tech ever. They did scrap together a couple wins after naming Philip Montgomery interim coach. They beat Wofford. They pulled I think they were double-digit dogs against NC State in that game. And then they lost to Wake Forest this past weekend, a Wake team that did Georgia Tech a lot of trouble. So, they're 2-4. They have a really, really tough schedule coming up. Obviously, they play Georgia Tech. They play Miami. They play Florida State, I believe. I think eventually, and it could be this weekend even, I think the bottom's just going to fall out for this team at some point. You get that interim coach bump a little bit. Sometimes it sustains and sometimes it doesn't. I don't even have to remind Tech fans of that. Just 3 years ago, you had it. Jeff Collins gets fired and Tech comes out and beats a top 25 Pitt team as a big underdog. They beat Duke in overtime. You were an awful loss against Virginia away from, going to a bowl game with Brent Key as the interim head coach. And then obviously, they pulled a pretty stunning upset against North Carolina later that year and then played Georgia tough for 2 quarters, But sometimes you'll have situations like that where teams will rally around their interim coach for a long period of time, maybe even the rest of the season. Heck, we've seen Ed Orgeron do that quite a few times wherever he's been, whether it was USC or LSU, got him the job at LSU. And then sometimes it just doesn't last. You'll see that bump for a little bit. They'll play inspired football. They'll run into a little bit of a roadblock, and that's it. I don't know if it's going to be against Georgia Tech. I don't know if it's going to be later. I feel like the bottom will really, really fall out with Virginia Tech, and I think it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, and I think out of this bottom layer of team, I think Virginia Tech is the most interesting because I still do see a path. There is talent at some spots on this team. I think they do have talented guys, but one of the big issue is, you lose a head coach, you lose some guys in the transfer portal, you lose a lot of depth. Just looking at the injury report for Virginia Tech, it's absolutely brutal. They got 20 guys there, each week. I think right now they're a serviceable team. They're kind of middle of the pack, but like you said, the lack of depth is going to catch up to them. You're going to see it late in the season. They play Florida State, Miami, Virginia to end the year. I don't know how many guys you're going to have healthy there. It's just going to be brutal. But for now, I think they're a fine, serviceable ACC team.
Yeah, we disagree on the definition of of that, but we'll move on. That they'll be improved in the future if they hire the right coach. But this year, dead team walking to me. Unfortunately, we had to put Syracuse 13. Look, when Steve Angeli got hurt, I think any hopes of this team making a bowl game just absolutely went out the window. They have just really, really struggled these past couple of weeks. They got just torched by Duke a couple of weeks ago, then lost to SMU. They did battle back against SMU. They went down big early again, but they ended up at least, clawing back into that game. Look, their offense can, when their quarterback is on, which Ricky Collins has not been, like that, they have a good offensive staff, and I still think that they could give some teams some trouble. But when Angeli went down, it's really tough for them to put together something the rest of the way.
Yeah, in the big separator for a lot of these teams, like we talked about this 15-9 area, like a lot of these teams are pretty close. One of the biggest separators you can have as a team is quarterback. Ricky Collins just has not been that good. Very much struggled against SMU, hasn't really been the man. And I think a lot of these other teams that we're going to talk about later, they just have better quarterback play, and I think that's what you're going to see. Syracuse, a team, again, that we said lost a lot of their magic from last year, and then lost even more with the loss of Steve Angeli. So, hard to be super optimistic about the future of their season.
Yeah, and now I still think there is a path to a bowl game. Like, they do have 3 wins. They're off this week. They need to beat Pitt, North Carolina, and BC. Because I don't think they're going to beat Georgia Tech, Miami, or Notre Dame. I don't think.
All of those games are on the road too, so even harder.
Yeah, like Pitt, BC, and North Carolina are all at home. Like there's still a chance to get a bowl game. And to me, with the schedule being as tough as it was and losing your starting quarterback, like, to me, that would still be a pretty good season for Syracuse, I think, if they can find a way to do it, which is still not going to be easy. But, like, if they can get Pitt next weekend, I actually would feel pretty confident because, like, they're a better team than North Carolina or Boston College.
Absolutely. But, I mean, Pitt is a hot team. I would take Pitt in that game, but, there's still a path.
Yep. All right, let's go to number 12. Man, this team got a lot of talk at the beginning of the year with a pretty interesting freshman quarterback. They started the year beating Oregon State, Texas Southern, Minnesota. Then they just face planted against San Diego State, 34-0. And then, they rebounded and beat Boston College. They jumped out on Duke this weekend in what looked like it was going to be a fun back-and-forth game, but to Duke's credit, they really just clamped down on Cal. Look, I think, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Jaron Kiawe Sagapolatelli is super fun to watch, super talented. But for a Justin Wilcox coach team, this defense stinks. Like, they are just really, really bad. They have a favorable path. Like, they don't play Miami. They don't play Georgia Tech. They've already played Duke. I mean, I still like, they're 4-2. It wouldn't shock me if they found a way to kind of, like, let's say we get to like mid-November and they still only have the loss to Duke. Because, okay, they are off this weekend. They're North Carolina at home, at Virginia Tech. They do play Virginia and Louisville back-to-back and then have SMU to end the season. But, like, Cal should still make a bowl game. And, like, if they were to upset Virginia or Louisville, I don't think it would totally shock me. But they're going to have to play a lot better than they've played recently. And I don't know that my confidence in them has been shaken.
Yeah, and the big thing for me about them was the offense, heading into the first few weeks of the season. And then you saw it against San Diego State, 2 interceptions. You couldn't really throw the ball at all that game. Not end up touching double digits. That's the one thing that this team, can pride themselves in. And when you don't have that, it makes it kind of scary. But also just looking schedule-wise, like, I think they have a realistic ceiling of 8 wins because you got to go out, you got to beat North Carolina at home, Virginia Tech, Stanford on the road, and SMU. And I think those are all, winnable games, but you got to get that offense back. And I will say, I think, not going to try with the name. I'm just going to go JKS. I think he is very talented, but you've seen kind of shaky performances against teams like SMU who, however you may feel about them, like, that's just not going to cut it.
Yeah. All right, moving on to number 11. We're almost inside the top 10 now, where we can kind of start talking about some here. NC State, look, NC State was kind of one of my dark horses at the beginning of the year. And offensively, they've kind of met my expectations. I think CJ Bailey's been really good to start the year. Hollywood Smothers is, I think, in line to be first team All ACC running back. Unfortunately, their defense looks exactly like it did last year. And I think you could honestly argue this team should be maybe even behind Cal and Syracuse just because that loss to Virginia Tech is bad. It's just not very good. Look, they're 4-2. I think it's gonna be a close call if Dave Doran wants to get to a bowl game, another bowl game. They got to go to Notre Dame, then they have a bye week. They go at Pitt, Georgia Tech at home, bye week, and then they finish up with Miami, Florida State, North Carolina. Like they probably have to get 2 of 3 between Pitt, Georgia Tech, and North Carolina. They should beat North Carolina, but like going at Pitt is going to be tough. And I know I got some real pushback at the beginning of the year because in my preseason predictions I did have them beating. That was my Georgia Tech trip up game. I'm still not. I think it's less likely now, but I still don't think you're totally out of the woods there because I do think the offense could give Georgia Tech's defense some fits. But we'll kind of see how things play out over the next few weeks. But I mean, NC State, I give them credit for the win against Virginia, which was non-conference. But also, I think you have to criticize them for the loss to Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I mean, you can talk about Virginia Tech being energized with Philip Montgomery, one of the first couple of games, but that team, like
Got
we've
blown
said,
out by Dominion. Like
yeah,
at the end of the day, you can tell me it was not with an interim coach. You can tell me Pry was just a dead man walking. Fine. They got blown out by Old Dominion and then turned around and beat you. Like there's just no getting around that.
yeah, and then you let Virginia Tech average 7.5 yards on the ground and absolutely dominate you, and that's why um, I think because I was honestly scared about NC State a little bit heading into the season too, but just seeing that run defense, it's been brutal for NC State.
Yeah. Offensively, they're a good team. I think that
Yeah,
if you go in there and turn the ball over, it could and have a sleepy start, which we've seen some teams do. It can be a tough day. But if you go in there and play a clean game, I just don't think their defense is good enough to pull big upsets.
yeah,
Let's talk about everybody's favorite team, Clemson. This to me was just kind of right. I didn't want to stick them high up there just because they beat North Carolina. Look, I sorry to any Clemson fans. I'm just not giving you credit for that. I'm sorry. It's North Carolina is dreadful. I've just got to see it more. Like I've seen Cade Klubnik do that 1,000 times against teams like that, and that's like some of my frustration with him is he does that all the time against teams like that. I think it may be a good like confidence booster for Clemson though. Like they face Boston College, I believe, this weekend before they face SMU. I don't know where to like say their trajectory is because on like one hand, I could totally envision a world in which they're 9-3 and ranked in the top 20 to end the season. But like Florida State and Louisville and SMU are not going to be easy games. Neither is South Carolina. Like I don't think they lose all 4 of those games and miss a bowl, but like you could just middle it and say they're going to go 7-5. But like, I guess it was, if you're a Clemson fan, I guess it was mildly encouraging to see them come out and treat North Carolina like the team they are.
yeah, and I mean to me it was kind of a return to the team that we saw last season, but the expectations for you this season were so much higher. You go out, you lose to Syracuse, obviously Georgia Tech with the win over Clemson. I don't know how to feel about this team. That's the thing. Um, they're kind of a middle tier ACC team, but they have top of the ACC talent. They haven't performed like it. I mean, losing to Syracuse at home again is kind of an embarrassing loss. We have Clemson power rated or power ranked over Syracuse, but it's more so for what we think Clemson can be and not what they have been this season. And I think maybe if they kick it into gear, with this back half of their schedule, you could see like a 9-3, 8-4 Clemson season. I mean, it's just been rough.
Yeah, just good luck trying to figure this team out. Is all I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
All right, I'm sure this is probably going to be the team that ignites maybe the most debate, which is kind of funny. I struggled with it myself. I did put North Carolina, or not, God, no, not North Carolina, Wake Forest at number 9. The past 2 weeks, I've come away really impressed because, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way at all. I don't think that team has a lick of talent, but I think they're extremely well coached. Like I come away very impressed by how well Jake Dickert has coached that team. I mean, Robbie Ashford, he's not been a very good quarterback in previous stops, but like he's been at least semi-competent at Wake Forest. Look, their defense helped Virginia Tech, and I know Virginia Tech is not world beaters on offense, but like they held them to under 300 yards last week. Like they outplayed. We talked about it last week on our show. Like they outplayed Georgia Tech in that game. Not going to take away any credit for Georgia Tech for winning that game, but they outplayed them. They almost beat NC State. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting caught up in that. I had such low expectations for Wake Forest, and they're 3-2, which was a little bit better than I thought they'd be at this point. I come away impressed when I watch them, and not thinking that's an ACC contender, but it's like that's just a really well coached football team. And I know I'm probably going to we're going to get some flack for this one, but like this is where we kind of landed on with Wake Forest.
And yeah, and looking at it, like their offense is a lot better than you would expect them to be. And even then the stats suggest, because I mean, Robbie Ashford, what, 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions on the season. But you saw it against Georgia Tech. I mean, he looked fine. You've seen him throughout the season look a lot better than we both think he is. And then obviously you have one of the best running backs in the ACC. I mean, probably the most talented player on that roster. And I think they do have the pieces to go out and beat certain teams. I don't think they're a high level ACC team by any means. But I mean, you saw how they performed against Georgia Tech. You get out to a hot start and you dominate for most part of the first half, and I think you deserve credit for that.
Yeah, and like I didn't think this was possible at the beginning of the season. Well, and I know they still have a bit of a favorable schedule, but like you're 3-2. Yeah, I'm counting right, 3-2. They could beat Oregon State, North Carolina, and Delaware, and get to a bowl game, which I think would be fantastic in his first season. And like if you told me they upset one of SMU, Virginia, Duke, or Florida State, I don't think that's crazy. I don't think it's likely, but like if they got one of those, sure.
And I mean, they've been competitive, even in the losses, they've been competitive in every single game that they played this season.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like I come away impressed every time I've watched them. And
Yeah.
again, in terms of talent, they are not a top 10 ACC team. But in terms of how they played when I've watched them, I consider them that. All right, we're starting to get into like this is kind of like fringe contender status, I would say. And like again, I know most don't consider Pitt to be a ACC contender. I will point out that I've never been a big Eli Holstein fan. I never saw what happened Saturday coming. Like that kid came in and played terrific football for a young quarterback. Like they put 48 points, and even against a bad Boston College team, like that's super impressive. They're 1-1 in conference play. They have Florida State this weekend, and then they have Syracuse, NC State, Stanford. Now, one thing I do whenever we like lay out schedules for the future and stuff, it's always, oh, it looks easy, but then you're, oh my God, Pitt lost to Stanford. And so like just weird things can happen. Like that's how it can. That's why, I've always mentioned whenever we talk about Georgia Tech schedules, like, yeah, it looks awfully easy, but it's like, oh man, Georgia Tech was down to Wake Forest like that early. But like if Pitt were to find a way to beat Florida State, they already have a loss to Louisville, but now that Louisville lost to Virginia and is probably going to lose to a team we'll talk about later, it wouldn't be crazy to find Pitt in the middle of discussions when they're entering those last 2 ACC games against Georgia Tech and Miami. I don't know if it's likely, but I don't think Florida State's unbeatable by any means. And like, just keep an eye on Pitt. Is all I'm saying. They're on the fringe.
And I think they can stay in contention for a while, but to me, those last 2 games is where the path ends. I think there is maybe a universe where they go out and beat Tech. I don't think there's a world where, they go out and beat Miami last game of the season. But I think for the next 4 or 5 weeks, until they come to Atlanta to play Georgia Tech, I think they could see themselves as ACC contenders.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very interested to see what happens in that game against Florida State. But just
Yeah.
keep your eye. Yep. Let's go to number 7, SMU. If y'all remember back to the preseason, me and RJ both were not like we thought SMU was good, but I didn't understand like them just being a for sure top 20 team to start the season. They lost a lot of talent off of last year's defense, and like SMU is pretty good in portal evaluations, but they're not like the portal can be very hit or miss, and they don't recruit at a highly elite level at high school. And it's kind of played out a little bit how I thought. They've lost. Now they don't have a conference loss, which means obviously they're still in contention. They lost to Baylor and TCU, but they have Stanford this weekend. But they're going to have some very telling games against Clemson, against Miami, against Louisville. The offense is still pretty good. I don't think it's quite as good as last year's, but when you lose guys like Brashard Smith and some of those skill guys that they did, like that can be a tough thing to replace. But I still think this is a good team. They're going to have to pull some upsets, down the stretch here. Like they have to beat Clemson next week. If you figure in a loss to Miami, which again we're going to talk a good bit about Miami later, but like if you figure in a loss to Miami, they really need to go perfect in the rest of their games. And that's why I don't know if this team's capable of doing it, but they're undefeated in conference play. They're still in contention. And I think I would argue they're actually the team probably not being talked about the most right now, just because they don't have a conference loss. And look, going back to last year, they've not lost an ACC regular season conference game. Like their only ACC loss since joining the conference was to Clemson in the title game. So there's that.
Yeah, and I really do think I think SMU can go out and beat anybody in the conference with the exception of Miami. Like I think they are a team that is that dangerous. Kevin Jennings can will you to a win if given the scenario. I think I do look him as a top 5 quarterback in the ACC. I'm getting higher and higher on him as the weeks go by. And you do have a fairly favorable schedule. Again, it's hard to go out and win every single game. We are the favorite, but they should be favorites against Wake Forest, against Stanford, against Boston College, and against Cal on the road. So the only ask for SMU to keep themselves in contention is to beat Clemson or to beat Louisville, and pray that can get you into the championship game. Again, assuming a loss to Miami.
Yeah,
But the path is very much there.
Yeah, like it's again when you don't have a conference loss, like everything's right in front of you. And look,
Yeah.
we're all penciling them to lose to Miami, as I think most everybody is. But I'll point out that game is in Dallas. It's the first time Miami will have left the state of Florida the entire year. I don't know, just keep an eye on it, I guess. Moving to number 6, Louisville. I had them number 3 in the preseason. I guess they've went slightly below my expectations just because even in some of their wins, like they went down big to James Madison and Pitt both early, and then they found a way to get back in it. I thought they outplayed Virginia in that game, and then Virginia had 2 defensive touchdowns. Like they had a scoop and score on a 4th down toss, and then Miller Moss, I don't know what he was doing. He was about to go down, and then I know that some people think he was down. Either way, like he shouldn't have thrown that pass. Cam Robinson picked it off, took it the other way. Then they ended up losing in overtime. But they outplayed Virginia, I thought, in a lot of that game. They're just very inconsistent. I think the defense is a little bit better than it was last year. I think the offense is still pretty explosive. Like Chris Bell is very, very, very good. Miller Moss fits the system well. Their offensive line is a big problem to me. Like we'll talk about Virginia in a little bit, and I don't think Virginia's front 7 is anything to write home about. They got a ton of pressure on Miller Moss. Like I don't have the number of sacks in front of me right now, but they were able to generate a lot of pressure. And because you lost that game, you also have to go to Miami on a Friday night with Miami coming off a bye week. They're going to be big underdogs in that game. If you lose that one, your back's going to be against the wall just because you already lose the tiebreaker to Virginia as well, Miami, and then you also have to play Clemson and SMU. Like they're almost in a position where they kind of need to beat Miami, which I just don't see.
Yeah, and I think they do really have explosive guys on offense. I think their skill guys are really good. You talked about Bell, but Isaac Brown is again one of the best running backs in the ACC, in a conference where you see a lot of solid running backs. I think Miller Moss is also a pretty good quarterback. I don't want to say he's one of the greatest in college football, but he's a quarterback that can go win you a game. If you give him the right guys around him, he can go win that game. Now, a game that's in Miami, and a nationally broadcast game, I don't know if I can see Louisville um, getting up to go win that game. But if you do, everything's ahead of you. You have the tiebreaker over Miami if you end the season with one win. If you come out with a win, again, hard ask to go out and beat what some people think is the best team in the country. I would venture to say it's the best team in the country. But if you go out and win that game, your path is still ahead of you. And even if you don't, I think it's possible to see a two-loss team in the ACC championship, but it's going to be an uphill battle. You're going to need to pray that Virginia loses some games, Georgia Tech loses some games. Um, and I think both of those happening at the same time is almost impossible. But again, still a path for Louisville, but they do have, one of the more unfortunate schedules, with Miami coming next week.
Yeah, I mean, they have their last bye week coming up this weekend. Then they go at Miami, Boston College, at Virginia Tech, Cal, Clemson, at SMU as far as ACC play goes. So, again, if you lose to Miami, look, yes, they could still win out, have two losses, and still be very much in the mix if some things bounce their way. But, man, you're relying on other teams to lose, which is just not a position you want to be in because, again, we'll kind of transition this into Florida State talk, which is the team we have at number 5. But I think Florida State's good. I think Florida State could finish 10-2. I think that's very much on the table. But because they lost to Virginia and because they lost to Miami, who now both hold the tiebreakers over them, they've put themselves in an almost I just don't think there's a way for them to get back to a path to Charlotte, I guess is what I'm trying to say about Florida State. I still think this is a good team. I just think they ran into a buzzsaw Saturday. I think Virginia is a better team than most of us thought at the beginning of the year, and having to go on the road and play them was very tough. But remember, they still did beat Alabama. They still should deserve a lot of credit for that win. This is a much better team than it was last year. And look, I know everybody is writing them off. I think you can probably write them off as far as the ACC goes, just because it's now Miami has a tiebreaker over you. Miami's not losing more than 2 games in the ACC. Virginia theoretically could, but if you've seen Virginia's schedule, we'll talk about it in a second. I don't envision them losing 3 games either. So it's just going to be a very tough position for Florida State. I still think if they can really play well down the stretch, and Alabama were to end up winning the SEC or finish right in there, I actually still think there is a world in which Florida State makes the college football playoff at 10-2, just because they beat Alabama, and that could end up being as good a win as any team on the bubble there. So there's that for you Florida State fans.
Yeah, and you talk about that. The committee loves quality losses, and what is a more quality loss than a one possession game to Miami?
Well, okay. I look. I know we're trying to talk a little positively about Florida State here, but there was
they
a lot
were dominated in that game.
Yeah, that game was not close at all. I know they made a comeback in the fourth quarter a little bit, but that game wasn't close. And again, I still think Florida State's a good team. I think they need to look good the rest of the way. I think they need to win out, and I think they could still have a shot at the playoff, which I know is not the popular sentiment right now, but I still think it's possible.
Yeah, but to me, even making that game kind of close at some point, Miami's the most physical, like Josh Pate talked about it, the most physical, biggest, fastest team in the country. And you were able to make it look kind of competitive. And then,
I'll give them that. They quit. They could have laid down and lost 45-3, but they didn't. So,
in your own house, too, which, we've seen a lot of teams get dominated at home. And then your other loss is Virginia in a double overtime game. And Virginia, hopefully, if things go the way we think it'll go, we'll have a pretty strong record by the end of the year. So yeah, I think Florida State's absolutely in there in terms of at-large discussion. It's just you would need some other teams to drop out. Like, we talked about this before the podcast. Like you would need Michigan to lose a game or two. A couple of those Big Ten teams find a way to drop out of the bubble. Florida State would slide right in.
Yep. I still think it can be a very good season for the Seminoles. I still think that's a good team.
Yeah.
Let's talk about maybe the hottest team in the AC. Well, I don't know about the hottest, but they're playing really well right now. Duke. Duke was kind of a trendy pick to be an ACC dark horse at the beginning of the year, bringing in Darian Mensah from Tulane, bringing back their entire coaching staff from last year, especially. We'll get to their defense in just a second. But they started the year off pretty rough. They beat Elon, but they lost Illinois 45-19. And I will say, if you go back and watch that game, and I know this is like me trying to put lipstick on a pig maybe, but they moved the ball really, really well on Illinois, and they turned it over a lot. And there was just some it was a lot closer than the final score would indicate. Like if you're just box score watching, you're probably thinking I'm insane for saying that, but I'm telling you, please go back and watch that game. If you can. They fell down big to Tulane early. They did claw their way back, but hey, a loss is a loss. Like they did lose to Tulane. Since then, though, they've beat NC State 45-33. They beat Syracuse 38-3, and they beat Cal 45-21. Their offense is humming right now. Darian Mensah leads the ACC in passing yards right now. I think the only critical point I will make is and I hate being this guy, but it's okay. NC State lost to Virginia Tech. Cal was destroyed by San Diego State, who's not that good. They're a pretty decent group of 5 team, but they're not going to be a playoff contender for that spot. And then Syracuse, Steve Angeli got hurt. It was the first game for Ricky Collins as a starter. Again, I'm not at all trying to take away credit for him, but I will point out if I'm gonna nitpick and critique a little bit, I would say their schedule has been pretty favorable to them since losing those 2 games. And their defense has been very up and down this year. It's not been as good as it was last year, but this is a very dangerous team. And I think if you were looking at the ACC big picture wise right now, I would say until they prove me wrong, I would say stick Miami and Charlotte against the one of Georgia Tech, Virginia, or Duke. And the thing for Duke is they get to play both of the teams ahead. Duke controls their own destiny to get to Charlotte. And I think it's kind of flown under the radar a little bit because of how they've started, but they play both Georgia Tech and Virginia. They're off this week and then have Georgia Tech and then have another bye week before at Clemson, at UConn, Virginia, North Carolina, and Wake. If you even just split those games, you could be in a very favorable position at the end of the season.
Yeah, and we've talked about it with almost every team, going through their schedule. Oh, they could have a path to the ACC championship game, but they play Miami. Or they have 1 loss right now, but they play Miami. Duke doesn't have that. And whatever you think about Georgia Tech and Virginia, Miami is a better team than both of them, and Duke can go out and win those games. And you talked about, that what was really a unicorn game against Illinois, you don't turn over the ball 5 times, no matter who you are.
The closest 45-19 game you'll ever see.
But since they've started ACC play in the last 3 games, they haven't turned the ball over once at all. No fumbles, no interceptions. Mensah's 15 touchdowns to 2 interceptions total in the season. I think they've kind of hunkered down a little bit, found their spot. And that's why, again, it's Virginia Tech week as of right now, but that's why in 2 weeks when Georgia Tech, goes and travels and plays Duke, that's a scary game. I think Duke is a very good team. There's a reason why they're number 4 in this list. And the reason, you talk about a Duke team, normally it's the defense being super scary, but this Duke offense is legitimate. Went out and got one of the best transfer quarterbacks in the portal, and he's, shown that he really is that guy coming from the group of 5 level. This team is scary.
Yep. that game next Saturday in Durham is going to be massive.
Yeah.
Like I know there's going to be some sexier games on that day and whatnot. Man, the winner of that game is a clear path to Charlotte. I think it's the toughest ACC game remaining for Georgia Tech, and it's probably the toughest one for Duke as well. And Duke has a little bit of a tougher path, even if they win that one. Like I'll say, Georgia Tech won't be totally out of it if they lose that, because like there's a world in which Virginia and Clemson both beat Duke, but you're going to be behind the eight ball if you lose that game. Like it's massive for both sides. And look, I think that game deserves a lot of attention next week, and we're going to give it a lot of attention next week.
Yeah.
Is Virginia the most surprising team in the country?
I think they've got to be.
Yeah, and so I know there was a little buzz with Virginia because of the amount of transfers they brought in, experienced transfers too. That can always be hit or miss. Like sometimes you get a really good class like they've gotten, or sometimes you get 2024 Florida State where you miss on everything and you're 2-10. Then there was also a lot of talk, hey, this schedule is pretty favorable. Like if they can take advantage of it, maybe they can get to 6-6 or 7-5. I don't know if anybody thought that we'd be saying, is Virginia going to go 11-1? Like, and that's, do I trust them to do that? I'm still not all the way in there. I think their defense is sketchy, but the thing is, they've already cleared the two biggest hurdles on their conference schedule. They went on the road and beat Louisville. They beat Florida State at home. Now they have a bye week this week. Washington State at home. Yes, Washington State is coming all the way from Pullman to Charlottesville. That is a real thing that's happening, and it will be on the CW where it belongs. At North Carolina, I'll say that at Cal, that's a tricky spot just because you're going all the way from Charlottesville to Berkeley. That can be tricky. Wake Forest at home. Look, me and you both talked about, hey, we respect Wake Forest quite a bit. At Duke, off Virginia Tech. The most Virginia way possible to end this season would be to have a berth in Charlotte on the line heading into that last week and lose to Virginia Tech. I bet you even the most diehard Virginia fans will tell you that. I don't think it's going to happen, but like that's how much Virginia Tech's dominated that series. But man, I want to give just a ton of credit to this team and this program. I wondered, just where Tony Elliott stood heading into the season. Like it was his fourth year. He was on a lot of hot seat lists. They lost that game to NC State. They destroyed Coastal Carolina at week 1, and then they were kind of a trendy pick to beat NC State and kind of like, oh, look at Virginia, but then they end up losing that game. It kind of looks like a bad loss, but man, they have responded really well. Their offense is awesome. I don't know if you guys have gotten a chance to watch Virginia's offense. Chandler Morris is awesome. Jamari Taylor, their running back, is awesome. Cam Ross, Trell Harris, awesome. They got some guys to step up against Virginia on defense. Mitchell Melton, an Ohio State transfer. Again, they really knocked it out. Again, they're not perfect, but man, they really knocked it out of the park in the transfer portal. I think the interesting thing, it's something we talk about with Georgia Tech a lot. All right, now expectations are on you now. Like everybody's talking about, hey, Virginia could get to the ACC championship game. Hey, it's crazy we're living in a world where you can reasonably talk yourself into Virginia making the college football playoff. It's like they've something. So I don't think they're going to, and maybe y'all might think that's ridiculous, but like it's not like crazy now. Like we're in a world in which that could happen.
Yeah, and they have 2 good wins and 1 really good win in Florida State. I mean, Florida State went out and beat Alabama. Like you can't discredit this Florida State team. And I don't want to give myself too much credit. I was kind of high on Virginia heading into the season, only for the reason that I thought the schedule was super weak, and I thought, the offense, they got some pieces they could, maybe make some magic. To me, I think this offense can keep up with almost any offense in the country. I mean, like you said, they are so fun to watch play. They kept pace with Florida State. They kept pace with Louisville. Went out and won both of those games in overtime, in which they were, I think touchdown underdogs in both of those games, which is, extremely impressive. But now, like you said, it's the same conversation that we've had with Georgia Tech. Now you got to go out after winning 2 games as an underdog. Now you're ranked. Now you're a top 20 team in the country, and you got to go out and deal with this ACC schedule. Well, you got to deal with Washington State first, and then deal with your ACC schedule, and find a way to the ACC championship.
Virginia is probably going to be like a 25-point favorite against Washington State.
Yeah.
I don't know if y'all have watched Washington State this year. It's bad, and I feel for them and their fans. I could go on an hour-long podcast about that, how I hate how they got screwed over by all the conference alignment, but that's just a bad football team this year.
Yeah, FPI gives Washington State a 4.8% chance to win that game. So,
and it sounds about right. Like that, it's watching these two teams play. So, like, is there a chance Virginia comes out and plays not well and like overlooks them? Yes, and they probably still win by 17 points. Like the Washington State's bad football team. I want to just bring something up, and this is for you college football diehards out there. RJ, you might be a little too young for this one. So in 2008, when wasn't so much conference realignment and all this stuff, and there was we had a Big 12 South division. Texas, Oklahoma, and Texas Tech all finished 11-1 in the regular season, and all had one conference loss. Texas Tech beat Texas. Texas beat Oklahoma. Oklahoma beat Texas Tech. All were in like the top 10 of the BCS, and they gave it to Oklahoma. Like, I think the tiebreaker ended up being whoever was ranked highest in the BCS standings at the end of the year. And Oklahoma ended up playing Missouri and then beating Missouri and then going on to the national championship. Why am I bringing this up? Well, there is a world. I don't know how realistic it is, but there is a pathway here because none of them play each other in the regular season here, where Virginia, Georgia Tech, and Miami are all 8-0 at the end of the regular season. I'm just going to bring that up. That would be absolutely insane and wild. And I just like when I was thinking about that today or the other day or whatever, it's like, that's what that reminds me of. For you football fans out there, y'all should remember that one. And if not, go look it up. It was an awesome season. It was one of my favorite seasons ever, and that was one of the reasons why. All right, coming down the tracks here, we do have Georgia Tech number 2. I think the big differentiator between them and Virginia is the NC State loss. Like that's not a great loss, but you also have to give Virginia credit for beating Florida State and Louisville. Look, we're not going to go super in depth with Georgia Tech, even though I know this is a tech oriented podcast, but we did talk about them a lot last week during evaluating them during the bye week and kind of what we thought and how they played this year. I don't think they played their best football. I think all their issues are very correctable. And I think this is a team that still could have its best football in front of them and has a very clear path to Charlotte and ACC championship game. Will they get there? I don't know. They have quite a few areas to improve on, like as we talked about last week. But this has a chance to be a very special season for Georgia Tech. But again, it's one game at a time for them. They have to focus on the Hokies this week. And then you're faced with an absolutely massive game in Durham next week.
But yeah, the thing about the schedule is, with the exception of maybe Duke, I'm not sure how Vegas is going to look at that game. You're going to be favorites. Yeah.
I bet Duke is favored. I know that's not going to be an agreeable point with anybody that listens to this show regularly, but I really do think Duke will be a favorite next week.
Yeah. I think besides Duke, maybe every other game in your ACC schedule down the road, you're going to be favored in. And if you want to get into the college football playoff, you had to go out, you had to go win all those games. Now, if you go out and you lose one of those ACC games, like we talk about Duke, you drop that Duke game, you're not in ACC championship contention. All roads lead to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, where you can decide your season, go out and beat Georgia. But Georgia Tech has everything ahead of them as of right now. If they go out, they finish the season 11-1 with a loss to Georgia or a loss to Duke, I think you find yourself in the college football playoff regardless. Now, the only spot where I could see some problems is if there's a 2-loss Georgia Tech team that doesn't make the ACC championship. I would find it hard for the committee to argue, a 2-loss ACC team into the college football playoff.
Yeah, I mean we'll get into more of that because the only frustrating thing with talking playoff is it's like we need to have the discussion because it's like, hey, they're in the mix, like they're number 13 in the country, they're very much in the thick of it, but it's like you just don't know what the other factors will be around it. Like you don't know
Yeah.
who are you competing with for an at-large spot. Is it Notre Dame? Is it Michigan? Who could it be? So I won't get too deep into that, but like yeah, it's everything's in front of Georgia Tech. They haven't played their best football, have a lot of areas to improve upon, but like they have some good things ahead, I think. I don't think it's going to be any surprise, and frankly, this wasn't a discussion. I know this is not going to be again popular with our diehard listeners, but Miami is the best team in the ACC. If you want my honest opinion, I think they're the best team in the ACC by quite a bit right now. That doesn't mean they're unbeatable. That doesn't mean that they can't get to Charlotte and get upset. I don't think there's any team in the country right now that is just that invincible. But man, they look good. I know that they're, last year I think you could pick apart their defense, and they fell behind in some games. Like against Cal, against Virginia Tech, they got in a shootout with Louisville too, and then Cam Ward saved them. And you could kind of point to that last year as like, hey, that's going to run out at some point. The Magic's going to run out, and it did against Georgia Tech and Syracuse. This team is just stockpiled with talent, and watching them week in and week out. The thing is, I actually think some of these games could have been a lot worse. I think they called the dogs off. Okay, let me rephrase that. I think they played sloppy in both fourth quarters against Notre Dame and Florida State. I won't say they called the dogs off because I don't think Mario Cristobal would do that to Florida State, but like the Florida State game could have been so much worse than it was. Like Miami absolutely dominated them from first quarter to third quarter, and then Florida State kind of got back in things. Notre Dame, they were up 21-7 late in that game, and then they kind of got conservative with some of the play calling. But I think they're the best team on the line of scrimmage in the country. Maybe Ohio State's a little bit better. I think that's plausible, but Carson Beck has looked really good. You haven't gotten a game from him where he throws a lot of interceptions. And until he does it, I think there's been this kind of perception that, well, at some point Carson Beck's going to have a three or four interception game, or maybe he has multiple of them. And again, he could. Like we've seen that from Beck before, but he's been a perfect fit for that offense. Malachi Toney, that freshman receiver they have, is excellent. Like he's a real playmaker. I think they have the best offensive line in the country. I think they have the best defensive line in the country. I think they have the best player in college football in Ruben Bain. Miami I hate throwing the word flawless around, but like they look really good right now.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say about Miami. You look at every single position group, offense and defense. I think you have an argument for all of those position groups to be
Elite.
top 5, top 10 in the country. Like it's ridiculous the amount of talent you see on this team. I mean, you talk about the defense, Jacoby Thomas and Ruben Bain. There's infinite guys on that roster who can go out and win you a game by themselves, offense and defense, and there's not a lot of teams that can say that. You have true game changers all over the field. Carson Beck, obviously one of the biggest veteran quarterbacks, obviously a great presence on this team. Again, like you said, it's hard to find a spot about this Miami team that you don't like. I mean, they have skill everywhere, they have talent everywhere, and they performed. That's the one thing about Miami in past years. You've seen them have all of this talent, and that talent is performing at the level that you want them to, or they're not putting up the type of stats that you want them to. Miami has done that this year on offense and on defense, and they're scary.
And they've done it against a tough schedule. Like yeah. Miami has played maybe the hardest, maybe not the hardest, but like think about it through 5 games they've played. Notre Dame beat them. Bethune-Cookman, who cares? I know USF's a group of 5 team, but I don't know if maybe y'all got a chance to watch that. Like Miami treated them like they were like an awful group of 5 team. Like that game was like, I think it ended up being like 49-14 or something like that. Game that was never close. Look, I know Florida's record isn't great. I think if you watch them, I think you could agree that they're probably better than their records. I mean, they just beat Texas, and Miami beat them by 19. And again, it was clear when you watched that game Saturday how much better Miami was than Florida State, a Florida State team that beat Alabama by 2 touchdowns. Look, again, no team is immune from anything. I'm not sitting here saying Miami can't be beat. I'm not sitting here saying that they're definitely going to win the ACC. But if you want my just honest opinion, I'm starting to wonder if everybody else is just playing for second this year.
Yeah, that's the way I've looked at it. You're looking to go to the ACC championship game to go to lose to Miami, and hopefully you're in the college football playoff. I mean, every single game that they played this season, never once was there a second of, oh, I don't know if Miami's going to win this game. I don't know if they showed up.
I mean,
they dominated everybody.
Yeah, one thing I was interested in this past weekend is, they hadn't faced a scheme like Florida State. They hadn't faced like a mobile quarterback, and like for some of his faults, I do think both Mike Norvell and Gus Malzahn are very good offensive, schematic guys and play callers. I mean, they passed the test. I mean, I don't even know what you want to say. I mean, I was kind of interested to see how they would do in that regard. They aced the test. Again, it's college football. We just watched UCLA win as a 25-point underdog. We've seen some crazy stuff. But as of October 7th, 2025, Miami is by far the best team in the ACC and the team that everybody is chasing right now.
Yeah, in their path, like we've talked about everybody's ACC's path, it is the clearest for Miami. They are definitely, without a doubt, we talk about Georgia Tech, maybe they're not going to be favorites against Duke. Miami is going to be favorites and big favorites in every single game down the stretch, and there's a reason for that. Their path to the ACC championship is clear. They're the odds-on favorite. I think they're like minus 250 at some places right now, and you can see why.
Yep. We probably just pissed off half our listeners. But hey,
be real.
But our real listeners know we always keep it a buck. We always keep it absolutely. We give our honest thoughts no matter what it is. And like I know there's probably some people out there that disagree us, but I hope they can at least appreciate that fact that I'm not gonna fluff it up for you. Like that's just what we think. But hey, you know what? We've been proven wrong before. And there's a lot of football. Like that's the other thing I want to stress. There's a lot of football to be played here. Like there's a lot of football still to be played, whether it's Georgia Tech or whoever. Like there's a lot of things to figure out about the ACC. But I would say right now, given the schedules and everything, and given what's played out, I think right now the most likely scenario you're looking at is Miami gets there and faces one of Georgia Tech, Virginia, or Duke. Like I think that's the clearest way here. We're gonna learn a lot over these next few weeks when these teams get a chance to play each other, and then we'll kind of see where things stand there. But that's kind of our look. We're gonna do this every week, probably every Tuesday, and we'll see if things change. But we're gonna be back this week with our preview of the Virginia Tech game. We are going to obviously have our instant reaction, and again, really appreciate you guys for helping us grow the channel, for sticking with us through everything, like as long as we built this. Really appreciate that, you guys. If you again before you head out, if you guys are watching this, haven't subscribed to the channel, would love it if you would like the video, hit that notification bell. Also, let you know when that new content goes live. Follow us wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a review over there. Really appreciate all you guys. Love conversing with everybody, whether it's on here, whether it's social media. I meet several of you guys at Georgia Tech games when I'm covering them. I can't tell you how surreal that is for somebody like me that just never thought that was possible. But really appreciate you guys. Mean it from the bottom of my heart, and we will see you guys later this week.